People who have been homeless. What was the first night without a home like, and how did you adapt to your new situation? Sleeping in my car wasn't that bad. It was summer, so it was pretty warm, which was my biggest issue. Showered in the gym, and spent most of my day at the library before going to work. For the first few nights it wasn't bad. However, one night police found me sleeping in my car and escorted me to the local homeless shelter, which was one of the most terrifying nights of my life. Since I'm lying there in a top bunk, when a huge argument breaks out because one guy breaks out some meth. Wouldn't share it with a second, then a third got pissed and started screaming at them to be quiet because he needed to sleep. Exactly my experience. LMAO. Worked out and showered at the gym each morning. Headed over to the library to frick around online and figure out where the freak I was gonna sleep that night. Why would they forcibly take you to a homeless shelter? I mean, wouldn't they rather you were in your car than in a room with meth heads? Is it even legal for the cops to take you like that? I genuinely don't know, but it sounds illegal, or at least bending the rules. Slept in my vehicle. Couch surfed with a friend. Squatted in an unused trailer. All while still working at a Walmart. Saved enough to get a crappy apartment and just kept going from there. I slept in a near-empty garage block. Put blankets over my front and rear seats like a tent and had a duvet to keep me warm. Was absolutely fine until I woke up in the morning. Had a wee behind my car and noticed the white van next to me had an electric plug in it. Someone was sleeping in the van. Slept there a few more times. Kinda creepy, but kinda made me feel safer too. Respect and admiration to you. That's something to be proud of. Sorry to hear you lost your home. But what an amazing job you've done to get yourself back on your feet like that. I can't imagine it was a particularly easy task. Working all the while trying to sort out whatever things I'd imagine you have running through your mind at a time like that. Hope you're doing way better, and thanks for sharing. I was kicked out by my mother at 16 and spent 2 months homeless before the local authority placed me in foster care. I think what hit me first was how my own mother could make one of her own children homeless. I felt like the least favorite of her children. It all came out of nowhere. I racked my brain for years after, trying to think of what I might have done in particular. Also, the crippling loneliness you feel when you are trying to get hold of people to ask for a place to sleep for the night. I could not feel more alone in the world when someone would either not answer my message or tell me they were busy. I'm pretty sure I camped out in the park that night. Didn't sleep at all. My mom also made me homeless at 16 and I went into foster care. You should check out rekt_foster if you haven't. It's been nice talking to people who get it. Had the same thing happen to me. After 2 weeks I went into full survival mode, getting food and shelter where I could. It was only for summer. I even got food aggressive when schools opened back up. Took me a week or two to realize these other students were not gonna try and fight me for my small square pizza at lunch. It really changes how you operate, at least in the short term. My mom used to lock me out of the house regularly for no reason, and I never had a place to sleep either. So I would walk 2 hours to the beach and just wait until sunrise when my mom went to work and would sneak in through my window. Sometimes I would spend a few nights on the beach at a time. It's terrible, lonely, and really messes with your self-esteem, especially when you're young and have nobody to take you in. I didn't really have friends. She prevented that. I've been solicit-led for sex tons of times by grown men when I was 14-15 and was terrified the first few times, but quickly learned that being meek gets you in bad situations, so I would bring a knife with me and tell at them. I've learned a lot from those times, and I hate remembering the loneliness and the hopelessness. I felt like I could have died and nobody would have cared or even known who I was. It's a sad feeling knowing that if you disappeared nobody would come looking for you or even care. My mum kicked me out too, and I never worked out why. It still hurts. There's a part of me that still feels like a bad person. I was homeless for a couple of months a year or two ago. I had a car and a low-paying job, so I lived in the woods in a tent for a bit. The first night was miserable. I ended up sleeping really uncomfortably in the passenger seat of my car, and it was a really cold night. After that I got a tent and slept on an old climbing pad I had. The first night was hell, but the next several weeks were actually not so bad. I had a spot in the woods where I was well hidden and would cook over a fire. I really didn't have it that bad, but it gave me quite a bit of sympathy for people who really do end up on the streets in a much more desperate situation. Shiz is not easy. Hats off to you, because just reading that gave me the spooks. Weren't you scared out in the woods on your own? I've often thought if I became homeless I'd go camp in the woods. Get a job, and then rent a place. Well, that would be the plan, lol. Glad things have worked out better for you now. About 5 years ago I ended up homeless and lived in my tent in the woods. When the weather got colder, and after a few run-ins with local wildlife preparing for winter, I started sleeping in my car. I worked 2 part-time jobs but didn't work more than 30 hours between the two. Like you, I preferred the woods to a city. I found safety in the woods, as I've always been an avid hiker and camper. Eventually, when it got too cold to sleep outside and the snow made it difficult to camp, my friend got a camp cot for me and I slept in a glorified closet. She and her boyfriend lived in a very tiny trailer from the 70s that was barely big enough for them. I enjoyed spending time there, but it meant I had to drive nearly an hour each way to work. I eventually saved up enough for an apartment of my own, and found a better paying job. I don't know if people realize how hard it is to sleep in a car. There isn't a car in the country that is good for a night's rest. Good for you for coming through it. I'm just sorry you had to make that journey. First night my wife and I ended up sleeping outside. We slept in a local park that I knew. We had come down from the countryside with a few rands, enough for one meal maybe, and had hoped to stay with a friend. He was unable to give us a place to stay, so we had to sleep outside. After the insecurity of that first night, I told my wife that we have to find a safer place to sleep. So we climbed up the slopes of Table Mountain, about a 1-hour walk, and found quite an obscured spot amongst some bushes and trees. We cleared it out of sticks and rocks, made it a bit habitable, and then went make to the city looking for work. We'd spend the day going from one place to the next looking for work until it started growing dark. Then we'd head up the mountain to our little spot for the night. Did that daily for a month until we were able to secure a small shack room in the townships, where we stayed for another few months until I get a job offer. Was my wife's temp waitering jobs that kept us fed whilst I was looking for work. Holy shiz, I've hiked outside of Cape Town on Table. Super impressed, brother. First one I've seen that was 2 people doing it together. Talk about a trial by fire for your relationship. I hope you are doing a lot better now, bro. Jobs are quite scarce here in SA, so I can't even imagine your struggle. Started being homeless at 19. A previous foster parent put me out for coming home from college one night, and I had called up a friend last minute. When I started to realize I wouldn't be able to crash or stay anywhere, I am fairly certain I started to dread, and spiral into a constant underlying depressive state. All I could think about was, am I going to die like this? Do I matter? Will no one help me? I'm sad, I'm scared. I don't want to feel like I have to beg. What if I'm stuck like this? Is this really my life right now? 19 to 26 was a very challenging time. Wow, that to me, as someone who luckily has no experience in having no home for any period of time, sound like a long-ass time. Did you feel that way for the entire 7 years? Did you during that time ever feel better or worse than at other points? And more importantly, how are you doing now? I grew up in foster care too. Life after was stressful and I was in no way prepared for it. It gets easier, but I've always felt like I've been 10 years behind. When I was about 16, I went to homecoming with a bunch of kids and we had all planned to have a slumber party afterwards, can't remember where. I was in a town about 20 minutes away from home and had no cell phone. It was around 9:30 p.m. when everyone started to drop off and go home, and eventually I was by myself. I was about a 15-minute walk from a park I knew that had bathrooms which locked. I went there and curled up on the floor, trying to make myself as small as possible in my homecoming dress to keep warm. Some kids came in the middle of the night and yanked and banged on the door. Scared me half to death they would find me in there sleeping. The next morning I woke up and walked to a friend's house where they were all surprised to see me. Nobody commented that I was still wearing my homecoming dress. In hindsight it may have looked like I spent the night with a guy. Prefer that to them knowing I spent the night on a bathroom floor. I've come across a statement about homelessness where it says that no matter what you do, concrete doesn't get warm. So the best thing to do is get cardboard to put underneath you. It's true. I've been homeless several times since but always had somewhere to go. That was the only time I ever slept outside like a homeless person, and I wasn't even homeless. I'll never forget how afraid I was. I've never told anyone that story before.